Welcome back, Junior Archaeologist. Today, I am in the city of Ridgecrest. And the last time I was in Ridgecrest, or I guess not just the last time I was in Ridgecrest, but the last time I regularly traveled up and down the 395, I was always passing a sign for a town called Randsburg. It was just outside of Johannesburg, and I believe the two towns are interrelated in terms of when they were founded. And I remember reading there was a third town nearby that basically all these three towns were founded at the same time. But that's not the important part. The important part is that Randsburg is a gold mining town, and it claims to be a ghost town, which is interesting considering that a lot of the buildings are in very good shape and seem to see regular use. People pass through town all the time. So I don't know how much you can consider that a ghost town, but whatever. But I was curious to go take a look at Randsburg again. You know, it's like, why not? I'm down here and I've got the time, so let's go to Randsburg. So what do we know about Randsburg? Not a lot. You know, all the research I did online seemed to indicate a few basics. I mean, there are probably, you know, whole books or something dedicated to this part of the country. Randsburg was actively mined between 1895 and sometime in the early 30s. And all the research I found seemed to indicate that they pulled about $60 million worth of gold out of it in like early 1930s money, which I think is a lot of money. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's probably not industrial mining, you know, like Nevada mining awesome or whatever. But, you know, it's like it's money. Other things we know about Randsburg are that the town was more or less wiped out by two fires. At least most of the major town. Like, it was what I understand was a pretty substantial boom town by the time the first fire occurred. And when the second fire occurred, they just didn't bother rebuilding the town. You know, so basically from the time of the second fire to when the gold ran out, it was kind of like a living ghost town. Actually, that's not a bad word. I mean, I feel like Randsburg right now is a living ghost town. Like, people visit. I mean, I'm parked on the road up to Randsburg right now, and a whole bunch of vehicles have already passed. And it seems to be like an interesting tourist spot. I think the difference between a town like this and maybe, oh god, how can I forget the name of the town? Bodie, is the fact that the buildings seem to be in use. At least from what I remember. I remember eating at a cafe there. You know, and it's just like, well, how can you call this a ghost town if there are people still, like, you know, there are people still living here? Maybe by California standards, it's a gold town, but by the standards of Nevada, that's an actual town. That's like where people live. But, yeah, let's go take a look at Randsburg and see what we find. Alright, so I just saw a sign for something called, I believe, the Yellow Aster Mine. And I couldn't resist turning around. I actually had to think about it for a second because I'm like, god damn, it's almost 4 o'clock. The sun's going to go down soon. But I just could not resist going around to take a look at it. One of those things I've always thought is that if you are the sort of person who, when you see a historical sign or a point of interest sign, your first instinct is to stop and read it, you may be the sort of person who might make a good archaeologist. So first off, I have to admit, this is not the most official looking sign, but it's an interesting looking sign. God, look at that. 49 patented and 6 unpatented claims. I'm not gonna lie, I should have gotten the Randsburg by now. But I did see something as I was walking back to my truck that I could not resist looking around at. If you enjoy mining history like I do, there is one thing you will have to get used to at some point. Namely, finding all the historic canned stuff. I realize that if you are an archaeology student, this might not look very interesting. You know, especially if you are a prehistoric archaeologist or want to specialize in prehistory stuff. But let's face reality. You go where the work is. And in this instance, you know, at least in my experience, you spend 2/3 of your time looking at and cataloging historic sites. And if you're like me and you actually like historic stuff, you know, you're that crazy person, then you're also the sort of person who will stop and videotape it for no reason other than to bore your audience. Oh my god, I'm not going to touch any of this stuff since I don't have gloves. But if you are a historic archaeologist, or you want to be a historic archaeologist, one sign of a super old site are beer cans. In this instance, this is a a cone top. I was about to say a crown top, but it is a cone top beer can. And the, I don't know what you'd call that. I guess the cap would have been the same sort of crown cap that you use bottle openers to open. Yes, I know. I'm doing so well in my first video. By the way, I realize, or may not realize, since I don't actually have any site records for this area, this may or may not be an actual, like, recorded historic site. So hopefully I'm not doing anything that pisses anyone off. That's my PSA. But also I just could not resist stopping and taking a look around. If you're ever wondering what sorts of ways you can tell if a site is early or not, is learn what can opening types look like. This, for instance, again, I'm not going to touch it because I don't have gloves. In this instance, it's bayonet opened. That is a very early can opening type. Oh my god. Another sign of an early site is this. It's basically considered, when I was in field school, it was called sun-colored amethyst. Like, I'm not sure if this is coming through or not, but to my eye, right now, as I stand here, it's basically a super light, I want to call it lavender or purple color. And the way I understand it is sometime during the First World War, Germany basically lost its access to the sorts of minerals and the sorts of supplies they had been putting in glass, and so they substituted magnesium. And I guess after the First World War, maybe they continued just using magnesium or something. I probably have to look that up. But the important part is not that I don't know a lot about glass. It's the fact purple glass is another indicator of an old site. Also, if you're going to get into historic archaeology, learn your bottle marks, or at least carry around a cheat sheet with what bottle marks go with what company. This one is sort of like a rounded off square, rounded off rectangle with an N. The most common types of glass I know are usually the Owens, Illinois glass bottles, and this definitely isn't one of those. Oh, interesting. Get used to knowing your bullet types too. Like if you work in the West, you will be surprised, or maybe not so surprised, at how often you come across shell casings. Like, it can help, you know, weed out sites early on, especially if it's just a bunch of AK ammunition. In this case, however, this is 2520. Interesting. It's a rifle cartridge. Huh. It's a rifle cartridge. It is, God, I'm trying to read this and hold it for the camera at the same time. Oh, it's Marlin. Interesting. Huh. I wonder if that's a Marlin specific caliber. Probably isn't. But you never know. I have to admit, if you are a super weird historic archaeologist like I am, then stuff like this will really get to you. Like, I cannot lie, I have a whole collection of historic glass bottles at home. And this is really cool. It's an old 7-Up bottle. See, if I had to guess, I would say it was manufactured by Owens, Illinois. Oh, wow, look at that. Oh my god. Bakersfield. 7-Up bottling, Bakersfield, California. I'm not going to dig this up because goddamn, that's a lot of effort. But yeah, that's kind of cool. If you are recording a historic site, bottle bases are always the single most important thing, because that is usually where the maker's mark is. This one, I can't tell what it's from. I also realize I'm breaking my own rule by touching things now, but whatever. Oh, interesting. You probably can't see the mark here, but this is an Owens, Illinois bottle. Basically, it's got an I within an O, and then a diamond overlaid over both of those. And that is like the most common sort of bottle you will find at historic archaeology sites. And if you get really good, you can even tell plant codes. For instance, I believe, God, I used to know them by heart, but I believe plant code 20 is Oakland, California, which is right outside of Alameda, California, which is my hometown. Now that I've had my fun boring my viewers, let's get on to Randsburg. God, oh thank God. I almost thought I spent like an hour here, but I didn't. I only spent like 20 minutes. Anyway, on Randsburg. By the way, I should throw in, if you're wondered, what is a day in the life of your average field archaeologist, at least out here out west? Well, that was it. Wandering around historic site looking at cans and glass for like 20 minutes. Minus, of course, minus the electronic equipment and paperwork. Just in case you were worried, this was an interesting job. That's interesting. Randsburg is a lot bigger. A lot more occupied than I remember. It just looks like it could be a full-on town. I mean, it is a full-on town, but wow. It's interesting. My God. Last time I passed through here was like 8 years ago. And I feel like this town was not quite as developed at that point. Well, you know, relatively developed. Or at least, tourist focused. At least the locals know how to decorate. You know, the most interesting part about this being called a ghost town by Wikipedia is the fact that in most places in Nevada, where I live, this would just be a town. You'd just be like, you know, like a town where people live. I don't know what that says about Wikipedia, Randsburg, or Nevada. But it has to say something. One of those things that always proves to be true is that locals always have the most interesting things. This, for instance, other than being an Eclampus vitus thing, is a mining cart. If you ever watched the second Indiana Jones movie, that is what a real mining cart looks like. So this mining car is a little broken, but it shows the way these things would have been used. Basically, this track would have extended back into the mine, and little cars would have been pulled out. Basically, the way I understand it is that they were pulled by cable. That right there is a wind wheel. And that also would have been powered essentially by the same steam engines and gas engines that would have powered the stamp mill. And they would pull the mine cars, and the mine cars would open up and dump them out into what would have been called an ore bin. An ore bin is basically self-explanatory. It's where all the big rocks they got would have come out. And then the ore bin, the ore they got would have been transferred from the ore bin to the stamp mill, which unfortunately is blocked by a big tree now. Alright, while we're geeking out on mining stuff, this is a stamp mill. The stamp mill did. Basically, you take the big chunks of rock you mined and throw them into there, and then the stamp mill would basically, you know, break them apart. And the way it works is that there would have been like a giant kind of belt that went around that and spun that thing, and that thing would be spinning these things around, and then there would have been, you know, little cylinders going up and down, smashing the rocks. Simple technology, but a definite step up from an arrastra, which is the way the Spanish miners did it. And an arrastra, just in case you're curious, does it in a completely different way. Basically, it would just been a bunch of heavy rocks, or sometimes even like big circular stones that would have been carved up and kind of just like rolled over the rocks, and the weight would have just been enough to crusted rocks. And usually that was done by burros, donkeys, I think. This, by contrast, were powered by steam engines, which would have, you know, provided the motion to get that moving. And then eventually, I believe in like starting sometime after the First World War, maybe even earlier, the steam engines would have been replaced by gas engines. Very primitive gas engines. You know, it's interesting. Assuming you can hear me over the sound of the car. I have to admit, this place, I said it before, but man, this place is a lot more occupied than I thought it was going to be. Like, wow. The term living ghost town definitely is a good kind of descriptor for this place. I mean, granted, everyone seems to live in fifth wheels and various sorts of RVs as opposed to the houses, but man, this place literally just looks like a town to me. Of course, that's probably what I get for living in Nevada for so long. Ooh, interesting. Wow, that mine is actually still set up. Hey, they even have a library here. Alright, I'm going to take a stop. Or I'm going to stop here for a quick second, because I just saw something interesting, at least to me as an archaeologist. Alright, I'm not so sure how much of this my camera is capturing, but I thought I'd stop to show you what all those disparate elements, the way they would have been set up. Basically, if you look at the far back, literally the pickup truck, that basically would have been part of the track system that would have been built to like haul the ore carts out of the mine shaft. And then, even though it's really tiny, that old A-frame structure is what I believe is actually what I know is called a head frame. That one's sort of tiny. Basically, the head frame is sort of like the lever fulcrum, where the all the cabling would have been winding around to pull all the mining carts out of the mine shaft, because it would have been like a vertical rise, and it would have pulled it out along the track, and then the track would have led to the ore bin. That's an ore bin right there. This sort of square structure. Unfortunately, the wood kind of blends with the background. You know, the background of the dull brown mountains. But yeah, so basically the ore carts would have come out, flipped over, dumped the ore into there, would have passed through like a grizzly, which again is like a basically would have separated dirt from the ore, and then down to the ore bin, and then it would have gone into basically the larger chunks of rocks would then have been ready to put into another cart, at least I think it was a cart, and from there it would have gone to the stamp mill. Yes, I'm not sure how much of this a GoPro lens can pick out from the landscape, but yeah, that's the way a mine looks. You know, at least one that isn't in operation, or complete, or in great shape. In fact, if you look around, you'll notice that basically there are all sorts of head frames around here, and that stuff right there, below where that head frame is, and over there, those are called tailings piles, and basically that's where the spare dirt that they didn't need would have just been dumped over out of the grizzly, or out of the mine cart, and basically all the stuff they didn't want would have just been dumped out. And those are always fun to climb up. I forget which place around here it was, but I know for a fact that I had to record a site someplace near here. I forget why. Well, I mean, I know why, I know what project it was, but I forget why that particular mine was of more interest than the others. In fact, actually, I think it's that one right there with the buildings and stuff. I'm not sure if I'm blocking the whole, I'm not sure if I'm blocking the camera or not, but yeah, we had to go record that. I'd actually drive over there if I could, but the last time I was over there, I was actually here for a reason. We had like work authorizations and permits to go on like this land, whereas today I'm pretty sure, well actually no, I definitely know I do not. So I'd just be trespassing, and that is a very bad thing. Oh wait, this is an even better view of the grizzly and head frame that's collapsed. Little word of advice: don't go in any of these buildings if you don't have to. Not necessarily because they're structurally unsound, some of them are, but because a lot of them use asbestos insulation, which obviously is very bad for you. I remember a project in some place in central Nevada where actually my job for that day was to be the only one to go inside the building and take photos of it, which was always fun. Thankfully I didn't breathe in a whole lot, but you know, work hazards. And that was the town of Randsburg from an archaeologist point of view. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this, and I'm sure I'll get better at it as time goes along. But if you have any suggestions about, you know, I don't know, my video style, my editing style, what else you want to see, let me know in the comments down below. If you did find that useful anyway, despite this being my first attempt at touring a town or showing off a town, you know, with an archaeologist eye, you know, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's so many places I've always wanted to visit and take my time looking through, but haven't, just because I've always been so busy heading to places. And until I visit another town I've always wanted to see, don't forget to have a good day, Junior Archaeologist.